So thank you everybody for joining this morning. Here we are. Control Products has got another product webinar for you that we think will be exciting and show you some of the capabilities and some of the different RFID products from EMX. We're going to be talking about the long-range RFID products and some of the other accompanying EMX products that can help complete an RFID project. We've been a long-time partner, EMX and Control Products, and our relationship has grown, and we've seen it strengthen since they brought on the RFID products in their portfolio. Typically, we'll think of access control, sensors, safety solutions when we think of EMX, but now we can have a complete solution by adding in the RFID products. With all that said, I would like to introduce Joe Williams, President and CEO of EMX. Joe, it's all yours.
Thank you, Butch. Good morning, everybody. Appreciate everyone attending today. And first of all, I want to start off by thanking the entire CPSG team for all you do on behalf of EMX, our employees, and all our dealer installers out there. You guys do a fantastic job, and it's a pleasure working with you. So today we're going to talk about RFID. So these are long-range, ultra-high frequency, which in our world means 915 megahertz. RFID readers and tag systems, predominantly for automatic vehicle identification at gates or doors or anywhere we want to permit access onto a facility. So EMX is new to RFID, but transponder reader engineered systems, or TRE for short, is not new to the industry. They've been around for about 10 years, and we purchased them in June of last year. So we're just now starting to rebrand all of our products with the EMX logo instead of the TRE logo. But we've been keeping an eye on TRE for a number of years. We finally decided they were in the process of developing their own reader to be manufactured in the United States. Previous to that, they'd purchased some Chinese readers that they sold under private labels with middling degrees of success, I would say. And so we watched them for a while. Once they launched their own made in the United States version and designed in the United States version of the reader, we watched them for about a year, and then made sure they had all the bugs worked out. And then we went ahead and bought them in June of 2023. So so far so good. It's been a really good acquisition for us. So there's a couple of different. I just want to draw your attention to the bottom right portion of this slide. There's a couple of different technologies they have. For the purposes of today, and what you're most likely going to see out there is this ultra high frequency, which is UHF for short, 900 megahertz in North America, RFID solutions for automatic vehicle identification. But I do want to point out there's some other technologies out there at a little bit of a lower frequency. They're not typically used, but if you ever do have an instance where you need really long range, we can also help you with that. So we're talking ranges of 150 feet. Instead of, say, 20 feet. Those are not typical anymore. Now, for the most part, everyone's using UHF 900 megahertz for automatic vehicle identification. So predominantly used around parking gates and building access credentials. So today, what we're going to talk about a little bit is introducing you to the technology. We're going to keep it fairly high level, talk a little bit about where it fits our product line, and why people pick us over some of the competitors. So to start with just the basics of what is RFID. So what we do is we make a reader, which you see on the right here, that round is our Patriot E reader. So we make a reader that is composed of a circuit board and an antenna. And what we're doing, that antenna is broadcasting at 915 megahertz, puts a pulse out into the atmosphere, and it's looking for tags. These tags can be windshield tags and hang tags, and we'll get a little into that a little bit later in the deck. But each of those tags has their own antenna on it. So what happens is we broadcast 915 megahertz. The tag's antenna absorbs that energy, powers up for a very brief couple of microseconds, a little microchip that's attached to that antenna, and rebroadcasts from the tag back to the reader. So the way a reader really works is it yells, "Hey, is there any tags out there?" Listens for a response. When it gets one, what it's receiving back is usually just a simple ID number. So the way to think of RFID is it's really a way to assign an identity or a number, a unique number, to really whatever you want to put a tag onto. So in our industry, there's lots of different applications. So some of the simple ones you probably use to get in the building you're in this morning. If you have a key fob on your keychain and you hold it up to a little card reader, well, that's actually RFID. It's not necessarily ultra high frequency and the bandwidth we need where you can get long range. It's a lower frequency where you need to be really, really close to the reader, but that is still considered RFID. Also, people wear like a lanyard with their face printed on it, with an ISOM badge. That can be long range RFID. So you use that to hold up to a reader, and it'll let you in a building or a room. Sometimes they're even at parking access or at an entry gate onto a commercial facility. And then we have on the far left here, automatic vehicle identification application, where we're really just trying to identify a car, and it has been given a unique ID number, and that ID number is authorized to get access into a building or into a car wash for a recurring revenue application, or perhaps a restaurant that's trying to identify who's in the queue coming in to an order line at a restaurant. So all different kinds of applications for AVI, but predominantly parking and accessed to a facility through a gate. So that's what we're talking about here. And in the middle, you see a couple different versions of our readers, but we're just talking to a tag that's deployed on the vehicle. And then when the reader reads that ID number, it sends that ID number typically over Wiegand. It's still used predominantly, probably over 90% of people are using Wiegand. So the reader broadcasts Wiegand out the 3 Wiegand wires over to some sort of a controller. That controller can either be in the gate operator itself, or sometimes it's in a little box near the gate operator. And that door controller is actually the clearinghouse of all the credentials. So it'll have the credentials stored inside that controller. And so it's going to decide, is that vehicle ID number that I'm seeing coming up to my gate authorized to enter? And if it is, the door controller opens the gate. So just to kind of review, there's 3 components to the system. There's the tag, there's the reader, and then there's the controller that's going to do the clearing house for all those authorized ID tags. So some of the key features of an EMX RFID reader, we offer 2 types. We have the Patriot E, which uses our circular polarized antenna, and then we have the Patriot L that uses a linear standard antenna. So it's important to understand the differences, and I think if you were managing a branch, I would want to know this. So if the reason we have circular polarized antenna, and typically that's the most common one that CPSG has been stocking and it has been purchasing from EMX. And the reason we sell it is because a circular polarized antenna, when it's oscillating the RF signal, it's a sinusoidal wave, but then we spin that wave. So it ends up being like a corkscrew coming off of the reader from the antenna. And what that allows us to do is pick up tags of varying orientation on the car, whether they're vertical or horizontal. Now, one note with EMX's readers, we actually optimize that circular polarized antenna to look for vertical tag. It favors vertical tags over horizontal tags. So just keep that in mind. It's always going to read a vertically deployed tag at a little further distance than it's going to read a horizontal tag. And we do that for good reason. One, a lot of people use hang tags, and hang tags are always vertical. So we're trying to optimize to get that read range at that longer distance. And 2, if we're getting in front of a customer or your end users early enough, they haven't deployed RFID, say, and we can educate them and we can steer them in one direction, say, look, lean vertical first. That allows them to get longer range. So they'll read a vertical tag longer than they'll read a horizontal tag. So keep that in mind with our circular polarized antenna. If range is, a deciding factor in installation, just because of where you have to install that reader to where the read zone is on the vehicle, and you need to get farther, linear standard will always be farther than circular polarized. It will always have longer range. And the reason for that is very simple. If I only have to oscillate the RF signal in one direction versus oscillating it one direction and then spin it, it just takes less energy to do it one direction. So as a result, I can get farther. The thing you need to remember, though, if you're using a linear standard antenna, is the tag orientation is critical. So our Patriot L requires a vertically oriented tag. So keep that in mind. I will give you one little tip that you can kind of get away with if you have a dealer installer that kind of got a little bit out of control and started putting tags both horizontal and vertical on the car in varying places. You could always take like the Patriot L vertical polarized reader and just turn it at 45 degrees. And you'll sort of optimize the read range of both the horizontally and vertical tags. We're not recommending that. You won't find that in any of our literature, but it does work. And I've seen people, after they stuck 100 tags on their commercial vehicles and put them both horizontal and vertical, and call us and say, we've got a problem, we screwed up. We just turn that 45 degrees and they're able to read both tags. Again, at a little bit of a shorter distance, but it'll still pretty good, about 18 feet we were able to get at that site. So keep that in mind. It's a little trick you can use. But for the most part, almost every, a large majority, I'd say 70% of our orders are the Patriot E circular polarized antenna so that they can read either vertical or horizontally deployed tags. Another thing to think about with EMX readers is we have two primary modes, and this isn't just unique to EMX. Other of our competitors also use these two modes. We have what's called timer mode or timed mode, and what that is where the reader just broadcasts at a certain cadence. The default from EMX is once a second. So once a second, we shoot RF out, listen for a tag, and then shoot out RF again, a second later. So it's sort of it's called in the industry, we call it interrogation. So we interrogate the area and listen for a tag, interrogate the area and listen for a tag, just on a repeat timer in perpetuity. So that's timer mode. Trigger mode is a little different, and there's some unique areas where you may want to use it. So what trigger mode does is, as long as the trigger is closed, or whatever switch you have it hooked to is closed, it's going to read in timer mode. So an example of that would be as if you didn't want the reader reading 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You only wanted it to read when there's a vehicle over a loop, say at a kiosk, for instance, at a payment kiosk. So you could use trigger mode in that case so that when the loop detects a vehicle, now the reader wakes up and starts interrogating at whatever the timed cadences you have set in the reader. Again, default out of the box, timer mode is once a second, and default from EMX, the reader is in timer mode, which is a typical installation. One thing to talk about, another instance where you might use trigger mode, is if you had a real unique situation in a parking garage where you had two readers, an entrance lane and an exit lane were right next to each other, and you had two readers kind of pointed at in opposite directions. They were facing each other. And so that would be a good application to consider using trigger mode instead of timer mode. I won't get into the physics of it, but you can get a little bit of interference if two readers are pointed directly at each other. So by using trigger mode, you're not constantly broadcasting the area with 915 megahertz RF noise. Communication options. So what we're talking about here are the methods at which the reader communicates to the door controller. So again, the reader's reading the tag ID number off the tag that's been deployed on the vehicle, and it's sending that information to a door controller that's acting as the clearinghouse for that credential. And it can do it several ways. Wiegand, by far the most typical. And that's just 3 wires. It's their typical 26-bit Wiegand, but there's several other Wiegand formats. We make tags for all of them. So Wiegand would be typical. The new security protocols that are public, higher level of encryption is OSDP. So our standard Patriot e-reader and offers OSDP over a cable connection called RS-485. So if you have like a prison system or a military application, they're most likely not going to let you get away with Wiegand. They're going to make you do OSDP. The good news is, if you're using the EMX Patriot E and even the Patriot L, it's an option. OSDP is standard on board, and you'll be able to use that. It's also nice because you can upgrade. So if somebody puts in 26-bit Wiegand, and then in 5 years, they redo their security system and just go with the latest, greatest level of encrypted security, they'll upgrade to OSDP communication instead of Wiegand, and you won't have to swap out the readers. You just change which cable connection you're using, and you're off to the races. We also do serial over RS-232, and we offer a TCP/IP version or an Ethernet version If they want to just connect directly to a door controller, that's fairly common. We also have a couple other things that we do that others do not do. We offer the ability to add Bluetooth credentialing to the reader. This is typically used as backup. So, so you're going to have an RFID tag on your vehicle, but if there's ever a scenario where that RFID tag doesn't work, or somebody used a rental car that day and they're not driving in the vehicle that had the tag on it, you could have this backup credential that on their phone. It would be stored in their wallet, and it would read from their phone that credential and clear it through our reader. So we put a Bluetooth radio inside our reader to clear Bluetooth credentials. One thing to keep in mind, they're expensive. They're about double the cost of a tag. So you generally don't, we generally don't see, we may see somebody buy 200 RFID tags and then do 5 Bluetooth credentials for that same facility on top of it, and just give those credentials to key individuals that need to be get in and out of the property, no matter what vehicle they're in. And then we also have a Wi-Fi option. So I want to be clear one thing, that our Wi-Fi option is to configure the reader. It's not a Wi-Fi option to communicate with the door controller. So it's really a feature for the installers. And so the reason this would be important is if you bought, let's say you're a parking garage technician, and you've got 8 gates on this garage, and you want to go through and optimize all the read ranges and make sure you've got the power set correctly on all these readers. For most people's or our competitors, you've got to unwire it, put an RS-232 connector on it, plug it into a laptop, pull up the software, and then you can configure the reader. That's true with our readers as well out of the box. But if you order a special Wi-Fi option, I think we charge like another $100 or $120. They don't have to use their laptop. They can leave the reader right where it is, and they can connect to the reader over an app. And you're not going to be able to like load credentials or anything into a door controller from that, but you can do things like change from trigger mode to timer mode, or change the frequency at which the timer mode is activated, or change the power on the RF antenna. A lot of people, when I say that, people think they want to increase the power to increase the range, but most common is to actually turn the power down to have less reflections in the environment, which we'll talk about later. So it's just an option to make life easier for the installer so that they don't have to get their laptop out of the truck if they're changing things on site. So a couple of things to talk about. I want to kind of put myself in the shoes of a branch manager. So what we see is a lot of dealer installers, they pass on doing RFID. They'll do the gate automation. They'll do put in the parking barrier arms. They may even put in a box and put the door controllers in it. But then RFID, they get nervous. Like, I don't know RFID. Sometimes it's unreliable. I don't want to, so they don't even touch it. And so the purpose of this slide is just to show how easy it is. And a sale of a reader and tags, I mean, that can easily be a $2,000 to $5,000 sale for a simple industrial parking lot on top of the gate operator. So to us, the dealer installers that are getting this equipment up and running have done the hard part. Getting the gate automated is the hard part. The RFID is the easiest piece. And that's what I want to walk you through here. So all they have to do, we put everything in the box. If you've been seeing our products over the last several years, we sell products as kits. So we try to have everything, all the brackets you need, the hoods you need, the reflectors, reflector hoods, everything in the box when you open it. And the readers are no different. Our RFID readers include the mounting bracket. They also include the power supply standard, and they also include a test tag. And so really, you should be able to open that box and get that reader up and running. We also at EMX offer what we call them stanchions. It's a fancy word for a post. You can see it in this photo, this little S-shaped stanchion. We also sell those. That's not included in a kit, but it's a separate item that you could store at your branch to be able to offer people to deploy it. So the steps are very simple. They mount the post, they mount the reader on the post, they connect power, which is 2 wires, to our power supply. Then they connect the Wiegand wires, which is 3 wires, to the door controller. Most of the times what we hear from installers is they don't even have to land those wires. They just have to run them over to a junction box. And the security system team that's going to be putting in the door controllers for the whole building inside we'll put the door controller in that box and tie off the weakened wires. And then they just, once they have power hooked up, again, which is only 2 wires, they take the test tag out of the box, they hold it in front of the reader. If they see a blue light, they know they've got the reader set up. It's working. So it's very simple. Mount it, connect power, connect the communication wires, hold up the test tag, see the blue light, you're in business. So it's relatively simple. I did want to take a moment just to kind of show you the software. So this software is free. You can download it from our the EMX website if you go to the RFID page. It's also this software on the app that I was talking about. If you order the Wi-Fi version, is very similar feature set that you see here. So you have the ability to decide what communication method you're using, the power that you're going to want to drive to the antenna. So we start out at 25. You can go up to 30. And again, most people actually lower it. They don't raise it. The timer mode, the frequency of the timing interval. We can do things with the Wiegand bit format to kind of stretch out the pulse Wiegand down the wires to make sure we're getting a good read for long distances, but generally nobody ever touches those. So they're just basic feature sets that you can get. And again, our software is free. You don't have to pay for it. And it's on our website, easily to download. And the app you can download from Google and Apple Store. The Bluetooth credential I talked about, this is what it looks like. It stores in your wallet when you download the software. One note with a Bluetooth credential, if you do buy them from EMX, we deliver them via email. And you have 2 weeks to get that tag in the end user's phone in their app and deploy it. Otherwise, you've got to call us back and we have to get you a new one. So there is a timed interval that can't hang out there forever. So typically what you would do is you would sell it to the dealer installer. They would sell it to the end user. When they're ready, they contact you and say, okay, send me the tags for the Bluetooth credentials. And then we send you that email. There's tend to be construction to deployment of tags. There's a lag. And our window is 2 weeks that Bluetooth credential is alive, that you can actually deploy it. So keep that in mind. One other thing about Bluetooth credentials, they're non-transferable. When they load it on that phone, it's on that phone till the end of time. When they upgrade the phone, the credential does not go with it. So you can't transfer it to a new phone if you lost or stolen. It's like permanently attached to the chip inside that phone. So they'll have to buy another one down the road. So that's one thing to keep in mind. It can get pricey. Just want to kind of show you the size and shape of the readers. So the Patriot E is sort of the one that CPSG has been using the most of lately. It's circular, and as you would guess, it has a circular polarized antenna in it. It doesn't have to. We just did that, we didn't. Trey did. It could easily fit in a square housing, but we put it in a round housing. So the Patriot E, circular polarized. That's our enterprise version. It has the full feature set in it for all the upgrades that you would ever want to do to OSDP or anything like that. It's a great unit. Patriot L is our linear standard unit. Also a great unit. Has actually the same electronics inside. We can turn on almost all of the features. They're just not standard like they are in the Patriot E. So there's upcharges when you do it on the Patriot L. Keep in mind, Patriot L will have a longer read range than the Patriot E. The catch is Patriot L has to have vertical tags because it's a vertical linear standard antenna inside of there. Okay, and then this reader on the right is a new one that we're developing with the as EMX. It's a small reader. It's actually, if you're familiar with our Well 200, it's actually in the same housing. So that's about the size of it, the receiver housing, and it's going to have a range of about 7 feet to 9 feet. And the purpose of this short range, we call it the Patriot SR for short range, is to do a side read on a vehicle. So the thought being, you may have your UHF reader, they're both UHF reader. You may have the Patriot E, let's say on a 94-inch stanchion out near the gate operator, looking at the windshield, for instance. And then you may put a Patriot SR on the front of a kiosk or next to a call box. So it's doing a side read. And that way you get 2 sort of read zones. The Patriot R is set up. The reason we set the distance to 7 to 9 feet is so that it gets to the rear view mirror on the car in case they're using a hang tag. We get a really nice read from a front of a kiosk on that. So it's a little bit less expensive. It's a little shorter range, and it's designed to be really for a side read on a vehicle. The other area you might have seen, there's like at homeowners associations, often they do like barcode scanning to get people in, and those units are like, they're big giant white boxes that are reading a barcode sticker off the side of the side window of a vehicle, typically the rear passenger side window. So this Patriot SR would be used to replace that, basically, because if the homeowners association is already used to deploying tags on a passenger window rather than on the front windshield, this would be a great replacement. They can just put a Viper tag or a windshield tag on the back passenger window and get a side read with the Patriot SR. So we have prototypes ready, being tested. We expect this to be ready in Q4 of 2024, the Patriot SR, maybe in Q3, but right now it's targeted for Q4. This chart you can find on our website. You can also find it in all of our, we have an RFID brochure, but it basically ranks the Patriot M, L, and E with the different feature sets. We barely sell the Patriot M any longer. It's just like the Patriot L, just with all the features stripped out of it. Mostly it's the L or the E that we're selling. So I would focus on the last two columns. We're not going to go through all of these. I've talked about them mostly. I just want you to know this information is on our website, so you can kind of compare the different features. Patriot SR, I spoke about. Tags. So we have all different kinds of tags. One thing to talk about in general about UHF, or 915 megahertz RFID. So UHF, it's just physics. It has nothing to do with an EMX reader or any of our competitors' readers or tags. The physics of this technology is UHF will not work great if the tag is deployed directly against metal or directly against water or a big bucket of water. So you need to keep that in mind when we're putting tags on vehicles. And we also need to keep that in mind when we're issuing tags for humans, like ID tags and things like that. If they have it like inside their t-shirt against their body, that tag is not going to read. But if they just lift it 2 millimeters away from their chest, they'll get a read instantly. And the same is true with the Viper tag on the windshield. We'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide, but where that is placed on the vehicle is going to affect read range. So keep that in mind. So we have two different types of windshield tags. You see them in the middle and in the center. The Viper is a clear one. The white one is just our standard windshield tag. People ask, so I'll bring it up now. The Viper tag can be deployed on the windshield. It can also be deployed on the front headlight. Again, we like vertical better than horizontal for all of our readers. But you can use it in both locations. You can also use these sometimes we'll have customers that'll do a side view, put it on the side view mirror outside the car, underneath the mirror. Again, as long as that's not metal, you can get away with a tag deployment there. But we're going to talk about tag deployment process in a moment. We also offer hang tags and custom hang tags. So you can, for a university, custom hang tags are very common. We have our standard hang tags that are generally just white. There's a reason why people buy plain white hang tags or a white hang tag with an EMX logo on it. And the reason is if people steal them out of a vehicle. So if you see that you've got a credential to a fancy homeowners association or a country club and it's sitting on a dashboard at a grocery store, they'll just reach in and steal that credential to get access to the facility. So, but if it's just a generic white hang tag, they don't know what it is. They're far less likely to try to steal it. So just keep that in mind. That's the reason most of the time people buy just our standard white tag or the white tag with our part number on it, with our EMX logo and part number on it. But we do custom for those that want custom. We also do custom windshield tags, so they can get their logo printed on a windshield tag as well. One thing to keep in mind with anything custom, lead time is about 4 to 6 weeks currently. It's actually trickled back down closer to 4 lately, and that's 4 to 6 weeks after artwork approval. So custom's more expensive than the standard prices. We should be able to get you a quote on that instantly if you contact our inside salespeople. We can get you the price, but then we need to go through artwork sign off by your end customer. And then from that point forward, it's 4 to 6 weeks. So keep that in mind. So I want to talk a little bit about best practices for placing windshield tags, because this is a question that gets By the time you're calling tech support, you probably already had a problem, and we probably had a tag deployment issue. So this is a streamlined version of a document we provide with every reader, and we provide it with every tag order. As you know, most people don't read the instructions, but if they did, they would get to read a lot of this. But these are the highlights. So what we suggest people do when deploying tags, so this is as the property owner is handing out tags to their employees. They're going to log that ID number that we print on the outside of the tag. They log that ID number in the door controller with whatever software they want to use. And then our suggestion is they use a piece of masking tape or painter's tape and temporarily affix the tag to the windshield in the location they would like to deploy it. So common places for windshield tags are in the lower left corner of the windshield, upper left corner, driver's side. If that's the side that the reader's on, that's where we want the tags to be. Or around the rear view mirror, usually either to the left, to the right, sometimes directly underneath. But those are the typical places that windshield tags get put. But we want them not to pull the backing off and slap the tag up. We want them to temporarily attach it with masking tape and do a test read to make sure. A couple of things they want to make sure. One, that it's 2 inches away from the metal. So that A-pillar, that's the column that goes from the dashboard up to the roof of the car. It's called the A-pillar. We want them to be 2 inches away from that A-pillar. If you ask a homeowner to put that tag on, they're going to try to sneak it up directly against that A-pillar so that it's not in their eyesight, and they're going to have read range problems, because if it's, like I told you, if it's too close to metal or if it's on metal, it's not going to work. So we need to be about 2 inches away. Also, on high-end vehicles now, they're putting more and more metal oxide coatings in the glass windshield. It started out to block UV, and now we're seeing it's there also to block IR. So these metal oxide coatings are metallic, and they can affect read range. So this is the reason we want you to temporarily affix it, because you may need to move it to a couple of different places on the dashboard to make sure you're getting a quality read before you've put it in its final place. Okay, so do a test read with a reader at a gate. Make sure you're getting a good read and the gate's opening as it should. Then remove the masking tape, remove the backing on the tag, and put it back exactly where you had a good read location verified. One note, these tags are not designed or capable of being removed and reapplied. So if they put that tag on and it's a little bit crooked, better to leave a crooked tag than to try to reposition it, because they're designed. And as we make more and more tag changes, tags are getting better at this safety feature of not being able to be peeled off. Don't get me wrong. If you're patient enough and you've got a razor blade and the right solvent, you can get these tags off without destroying it. But most of the time you are going to destroy it. So if you hear somebody, I stuck it on the windshield, I accidentally put it on horizontal, I really want to put it on vertical so I get a little bit better read range, can I just peel it off and restick it? The answer is no. Make them take a new credential. They can't transfer these tags. They can't reposition them. I also talked a little bit about the side view mirror. So actually on my car that has an RFID tag on it, my best location is on the side view mirror, underneath the side view mirror, because I have a lot of metallic oxide in my windshield. So I get better read range. I get about another 4 feet by being outside on the plastic side view mirror. And again, I can also hide it so you can't see it underneath the side view mirror. So keep that in mind. Again, on a lot of vehicles, that side view mirror is metal, in which case you can't put a tag there. So it has to be the right situation that it's plastic. Also on headlights, that's another place you could deploy a tag. You have to keep in mind, headlights are lower to the ground than the windshield. So you have to worry a little bit about read range if the reader is really, really high. But you could do it on the headlight. Again, we like vertical over horizontal. And you want to be careful because hoods are almost always metal, the hood of the car. The bumper now is more and more times plastic, especially on sedans, they're plastic. So if I was putting it on a headlight, I'd want it, a little bit closer to the plastic bumper than the metal hood, if that makes sense. So again, but you're taping these with masking tape and doing a test tag as best practice, or doing a test drive to make sure it's opening, and then deploying it so you've got it in a good location. But I just want to keep that in mind. At least 2 inches away from any metal to give yourself the best read range. And you don't need to write any of this down. It's included with every order of tags. I just wanted to kind of go over it so you knew what was in the box. We also offer what's called the Defender. So this is the door controller I was talking about earlier. This is where the reader would be hooked up to a controller. You can hook our reader up to anyone's controller that uses OSDP or Weekend. We also offer one called the Defender. Currently, it's a two-door controller, meaning it has two relays to open two doors or gates, or really basically two switches. We are about to launch a four-door version. Once we launch the four-door version, we will quickly discontinue the two-door version. So we'll only sell the four-door. The price difference is like $15 between the two or something. So we're just going to offer the four-door controller. Our software is also free for the door controller. You can download that from the EMX website under the RFID section. On the download tab, you'll see it. So the way this works is you could deploy the reader, issue the tags, wire the Wiegand input to the Wiegand input on the door controller. We sell an outdoor plastic enclosure. This could be attached to right near the gate operator. They can hook up a laptop and issue or run Ethernet all the way back to their office if they want, however they want to do it. Talk to that door controller and they start issuing credentials. So they'll say, Butch Showers, he's code number 1001, Zach Eichenberger 1002, and assign those credentials and hand out those tags to those vehicle owners and load those credentials in the door controller. It's pretty easy to use software, pretty intuitive, very simple, and it's free. So our door control is really there to get the gate up and running. And again, you don't need to use ours. You can use anybody's door controller as long as it takes to it some sort of a Wiegand format or a OSDP communication protocol. You're going to work it, and they all do. So it's going to work with anyone's door controller. But we have one too, in case you need one. So we're coming kind of here to the end here. So I just kind of wanted to review like why people choose EMX's RFID products compared to some other options. The first is when we design products, we don't design them for distributors. We don't design them for property owners or homeowners associations. We design products for installers. So we are thinking about the person that needs to get the technology up and running. That's our focus when we're thinking through a design. And so because of that, we have some feature sets that are nice. On our Patriot e-reader, it's always upgradable to the latest security protocols. So they can buy one reader, get it on the gate, and they don't have to go buy another one, should that facility change its security standards or change door controllers or change anything. They can just use ours and just change some settings on it and keep going. We have a Wi-Fi option, so they don't have to get their laptop out of the truck. They can just use the app, connect to it, change reader power, change timer mode, change between trigger and timer mode. Those little simple things, which is really the only reason they would ever get the laptop out of their car, they can do with an app, so they don't need to do that. We offer Bluetooth credentialing if they need it. Again, it's not common, it is expensive, but it's an option for the one executive that says, well, I fly into town every time. I don't work out of this office, so I'm in a different rental car every facility. So that would be a perfect example of, okay, let's get that executive a Bluetooth credential so that they can get through the gate. So we offer a Bluetooth version of our reader that would allow that to happen. They're super simple to install. We put everything in the box, again, because we're thinking about that installer. So when you're ordering from us, it's fairly easy. You just tell us what reader type, and then typically you're ordering tags along with that reader. You just let us know what the facility code is, what the sequence number you want to start with, and how many tags you like. And then we build it in 2 days. Our lead time currently on readers is 2 days to build them. And on programming tags, it's about 3 days right now we're running. So less than 3 days, we're going to program those tags to order and build that reader to order typically. You are stocking some in your Texas location. I think you recently brought close to 25 readers, so your lead time will be even short on the reader deployment, shorter than most. And then again, just to remind everybody, we take a lot of pride in making our products in the United States. People ask us every year, why don't you just buy from China like everyone else? It's be a little bit cheaper, be more margins. We just believe making products in the United States, and we don't believe it's cheaper. We think we can do it in Cleveland, Ohio, just as cheap as they could do in China. I think you see that in the price of our products, and it allows us to be a much more reliable supplier, which we learned very well through COVID. and it allows us to customize those things or help do a configuration for a large install. So for example, let's say you were doing a parking facility that had 20 gates on it, and you wanted all 20 readers configured the same way without ever having to hook up a laptop or use the app. Well, you could get in touch with EMX and we can configure them with whatever we need to before we ship them. And we can do that because we're making them. So we can do that for you. So again, that's not for every 1 or 2 unit piece order, but if you had a large deployment, we can take care of that and again, make life easier for the installer. So I hope that was a high level enough to kind of cover RFID. I'm happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
Yeah, great session, Joe. Any good product training webinar should include best practices. So I love that you included that on the RFID side. And RFID tends to be mystical to many folks. So you made sure to underpin the fact that these are easy to install. This should be part of your product portfolio. If it's not and you're concerned about it, partner with EMX, partner with CPSG. We've got a whole department focused on RFID solutions. So if it's new to you, we'll make sure to get you over the top. But as you can see from a high level, it's a card reader, right? And it certainly has some amazing functionality that we can dive deeper into. But that's how you should look at it in terms of adding it to your product portfolio. We do have one question that has come through the chat line from Dean. How do we program the Defender? So you showed the access controller there. How's it traditionally programmed?
Yeah, so the software I showed, you download from our website. Actually, I didn't show the Defender software. I only showed our reader software. But there's software you download from our website to program the Defender. And you'll see it's pretty intuitive. That might be a separate webinar someday, is to walk through Defender programming. But you'll see a place there where you just add credentials and it's relatively easy, and you are assigning which weekend input that you've wired to on the door controllers to which relay output. And so it's relatively straightforward, but you can also do some other things like put in a 365-day calendar, for instance, on certain dates. I don't want that door to open no matter what. So it functions just like a door controller you would sell for a security system for a building, for pedestrian doors. It's basically the same controller. But the software is relatively intuitive. I don't have a screenshot of it, so it's hard to walk through. But if you've ever looked at any door controller software, they all kind of work the same. They all use the same terminology. And it's really all about issuing credentials and logging those credentials in and saying which Wiegand input is firing which relay output. And that's
Is it programmed like via RS-232, or is it a cloud solution?
Typically, they'll just use like a Cat5 Ethernet cable and hook it up, and your laptops now recognize that port, see it. When you have the software loaded, it'll just bring it up and connect.
A couple other things to throw out on that also. The software is no charge, no subscription for it, annual or monthly. And a couple other things to go with it is, like Joe said, you have the ability to do scheduling. You can also use the Defender as basically a standalone unit where you may hook up with a PC or a laptop, program it, connect it to your reader and your gate, or you can have it on your network so you can remotely access the Defender, so you can open a gate remotely, reporting functions, things like that. And Joe, if I can, I'd like to add a couple other things. I mean, you had mentioned, on the Patriot line, the feature set is very rich. There's a lot you can do there. You look at the communication, you've got so many different ways you can communicate with those readers. Another thing, the readers are also frequency hopping. Good thing about that is you don't have to worry about it getting jammed up on another frequency that may be in the same environment, so you don't have that interference. One other thing I don't think was mentioned is you can also use those readers as a standalone reader, meaning you can put a group of valid credentials into that reader and connect it directly to your gate operator. That way you're not having to use an access controller, telephone entry, or any other device. So for a smaller site, where maybe they don't have the need for actual property control, managing the whole property, you can go that route, and it just takes one relay to add to the reader, and then again, you can manage the gate just by having those firm set of credentials in the reader.
Yeah. So what Butch is talking about is you can basically use the reader as a door controller, and that's absolutely true. You have to hook up a laptop to it at first, or RS-232 to configure those tags and load them into that reader. Couple things to keep in mind. One is when you're issuing credentials at a site using our reader as the door controller, we have one relay already on the reader, so it'll fire one relay we provide you. You have to go get your laptop to take a credential out. So for example, if I hire Butch and I give him a tag and he puts it on his vehicle and it's loaded in my reader and having my reader act as the door controller, but Butch retires, that tag is still inside my system, inside my reader, unless you go back in and remove Butch's tags, physically. So it's one thing to keep in mind in the door controller, having it separate from the reader. Like Butch said, if you put it on the Ethernet and ran it back to the business's network, that's a lot easier to do than to go out to my reader and hook up a laptop to remove a credential if somebody's moving or leaving. But for a small site, especially if they're only going to deploy tags on commercially owned vehicles, it would make perfect sense to use it as a standalone unit. So that is something we do that's different than most.
And like private residents, we seem to see a lot of interest there.
Perfect. That's another good example.
For 5 or 10 vehicles, so very inexpensive way of allowing them access control with just a RFID reader.
True.
Yeah, I think that answered a couple questions we had on the chat line around, say, high-end residential. That might be a good solution. And you can always, load 4 or 5 tags in there, even though you've only got a couple vehicles. You got a couple on standby to switch over to new vehicles, so on and so forth.
That's true. And if you're doing hang tags, it's easy, right? Because you're going to you just collect the hang tag from the employee or move it from one vehicle to the other. That would work great.
So Andreas asked a similar question: can the reader be connected directly to the operator without Defender access control? Again, that answers that question.
I'm going to throw it out there though. Just keep in mind, you do need what we offer is a RB5 relay, but you do need that relay between the reader and your operator. Ever has a question here about 2 lanes. Do you need a secondary slave reader? Just to make sure everybody understands, the Patriot line only offers a internal antenna. You don't have the ability to hook up a secondary antenna. So a solution would be there, probably 2 readers. If you've got an entry point that is maybe too wide or there's other obstructions, you would have to go with 2 separate readers.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Usually we use 1 reader per lane traffic. So one thing I probably should have talked about is a tip. I alluded to it a couple of times that most of the time people are actually turning down the power of the reader instead of turning it up. And the reason they're turning it down is in a multiple lane situation. So if you've got 2 lanes right next to each other, if your power is too high, your range is too long, you could be reading the lane next to you instead of the lane you're in. So people will want to turn that power down a little bit sometimes to shorten the read range. So we're focused on only 1 lane. Doesn't happen often, but it does. There are situations that are like that. Another situation where you may want to turn the power down actually is in really tight parking garage applications where there's a lot of metal around. If you think about a parking garage, all the metal we have around this deployment, we've got the operator enclosure for the barrier arm. We have the bollards to protect all of the equipment. We have the kiosk often. Sometimes there's a post with a keypad or a call box. And so that's all. Sometimes there's a metal gate even behind the parking garage to close the garage at night. So, and it has its own operators and its own set of bollards. So all this metal that's around sometimes these deployments reflect RF signals. And so people think, well, I'm having trouble getting a read range in something that normally would be pretty easy. I'm only 15 foot from the reader. I'm standing right in front of it. Why isn't it reading? What can happen is in these high metallic environments is you get these reflections that create what's called nulls or little small holes in the read zone. The simple solution is just turn the power down a little bit so we're not bouncing off so much and make sure our reader is not like trying to shoot from behind a bollard or from behind the operator or something like that. That's why we make, the reason those 94-inch tall bollards have this S to them is so that the installer can kind of pivot it and rotate it around to get a clear read zone. So just keep that in mind. Those are reasons why you may ever need to turn power down in a situation, depending on the environment.
Jim asked a good question, and I think that every manufacturer should answer this question to some degree. And to expand, I think, there's a lot of options out there, and a dealer can be successful with many of these options out there. It kind of depends on, where's the support, what's the support network look like? Joe, what does your technical support team look like, and are they on demand and available? And what hours might they be available?
Yes, so our technical support's available from 8:30 a.m. until 5 p.m. Monday through Friday Eastern Standard Time. If somebody makes a call, from the West Coast outside of those hours, we'll get to it first thing in the morning. Those are the first calls we take in the morning. So yeah, we're happy to help. And usually there's overflow. Like if there's a site that's really tricky and our frontline tech support can't get it, they all sit 15 feet away from the engineering team that builds and designs these readers. So we can escalate things pretty rapidly. And even last week, I had a homeowners association was having some trouble, and I flew down there myself personally to see the site. It was a large tag deployment. I had a feeling that I was going down there because somebody high up in the homeowners association had a new vehicle that was having problems with the tag read, my guess, and I was 100% right. It was the head of the golf club, and he bought a new Jaguar, and he wanted the tag on his headlight, and it wasn't reading. And the reason was it was extremely low to the ground, and he was deploying that tag near the metal bumper of the Jag. And so, all we had to do was move that tag location, and he was up and running. But it gave me a chance to do a training session too. So, and it's in Savannah, Georgia, a city I like. So we have plenty of support for you.
We were chatting about that before the call, right? They had everything from semis to Jags rolling through that. So that does introduce some challenges of around where you spend an adequate amount of time talking about tag placement, reader placement. And, in my experience, that is the piece that is not planned out well ahead of time or executed properly, but a critical component to RFID, especially in barrier gate applications where we're purposely letting one vehicle in at a time, right? And I think the tendency for end users, not our dealers, but our end users is, hey, I want that gate open when I get there, or I don't want to wait. But in those barrier applications, again, our intention is to make you wait. We want to make sure we're not letting the boogeyman in. So we're not setting that reader up with big range, to your point. We're tuning that range down, and we're getting very focused on the vehicles entering that lane. So those few tips and tricks of RFID will certainly keep you out of trouble. But the pre-planning is a big component, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Dean I think, asked a follow-up question on the Defender. So if you were to set that up to remote program, what would we need to do? Tie that panel into a network?
Exactly right. Yeah, you tie it into the network just like the rest of the security system for that facility would be typically what they do. Sometimes there's a security guard shack out there, so and they'll just run an Ethernet cable from wherever they've got that door controller mounted into the security shack. But most of the time, what we see is they'll run Ethernet all the way back to the main control room of the security facility.
Yeah, it is a cool offering in terms of that controller being in this weatherized enclosure, and probably might be a tendency to say, oh, let's mount this outside near the reader, and sounds like that's perfectly fine but that's an option, right?
That's correct.
I'd agree with you. We see those access controllers in this.
It's a matter of what do they want to run the long distance, Ethernet or the weekend wires. And so what we've seen is most of the time they'll run the Ethernet the long distance and leave it in an enclosure out by the gate. And so the weekend run is short from the reader to the door controller.
Well, we do have some really strong wireless Ethernet products in our tool bag. If that's the route you choose to go, we'll help you with that solution as well. That doesn't look like we have any open questions in the Q&A at the moment.
Great.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for organizing and presenting. You guys have done a really nice job with the transition. It's been quite seamless, and I think you've added some engineering prowess to the product line since you've taken it on. So it's been very successful for us as it has been for you. So appreciate you taking the time to educate us on the latest and greatest with your RFID solutions.
My pleasure, and thank you to everyone at CPSG.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Butch.
Have a good day.
Take care, Al.
Bye now.